Well, would you look at that? It seems like every single card of the first Riftbound set has been revealed. And since it just so happens to be part of League's universe, where this entire universe is trying to make sure that everything in this IP is ran under a single canonical version, that would mean that all those cards technically have lore. Now, what's also cool about Riftbound is that because it is borrowing a lot of its cards from Legends of Runeterra, which is overflowing with lore, that means that we know a lot more about the Riftbound cards than you might think. So today, no matter if you are already a League lore nerd, or if you just picked up Riftbound because it seemed like a cool game, we are going to explain the lore of every single available card. But just know that because we are gonna be talking about a lot of cards, the vast majority of the lore is gonna be a TLDR. Also, some champions have alternative versions which are skins from alternative universes, which are not canon, so we are skipping those. But now, without further ado, let's start going through the official gallery from top to bottom. So first, it starts with the champions from the Proving Grounds box. All of these have books worth of lore. And so, let me summarize them all in a few sentences. Annie is an orphaned girl that was brought into the Ravenbloom Conservatory, which was a special school where certain Noxians tried to turn kids into living weapons. The reason why Annie was here specifically is because her body was carrying the essence of Tybulk, a great fiery demon which one of the most powerful warlords in this universe used to conquer the world. This is why her spells are things such as Firestorm or Incinerate, which depicts her burning someone in the school. She can also summon Tibbers, which is the bear she's always carrying with her. The reason why it is so big and it is on fire when summoned is because that's what it looks like when the great demon enters a teddy bear. Next here is Master Yi. Master Yi is an Ionian blade master who mastered the art of Vuju. Vuju is a technique so deadly that when Master Yi decided to use it in combat, he ran through entire Noxian legions on his own. And currently, Master Yi is seen as perhaps the most powerful swordsman in the world. If you're wondering about the weird helmet, which is also known as the 7 Lenses of Insight, it is a special tool that allows him to see spirits of the Ionian spirit realm. Among his units here, we also have the Zephyr Sage, who was referenced in the legends known as the Saga of the First Lands. There it was hinted that the Sage of the Skies can return that which was lost to the world, but is still held in memory. Since the card shows that the Sage let a bird bring him a spirit blade, perhaps they have the ability to conjure spirit items from memories. Next in the origin deck we have Lux and Garen, who should be kinda bundled together since they are siblings. They both come from Damasia, which has historically been against the use of magic, because in the ancient times, other nations always tried to use magic to destroy Damasia. Unfortunately, Lux was born as a mage, and since she is part of the royal family, she always had to hide it. Being her sibling, Garen always knew that she was a mage, but he always pretended he didn't, because if people found out, Lux would most definitely be thrown into prison. Though later in the story, the mage rebellion happens in Damasia, and people kinda stop being racist towards mages. That's why you can see Lux using her magic publicly here. This scene simply happens after the rebellion. The little quote on the card even says, "I've been hiding my light long enough." Garen is also part of the Dauntless Vanguard, which is the most elite squad you can find in the kingdom. This is why you have other cards such as Recruit the Vanguard or the Vanguard Attendant. Speaking of which, there is also the card called Decisive Strike, which is Garen's ability. The man shown here is Lord Bevel, the man who protected Damasia against countless Noxian advances, who was also part of the Royal Guard, and who also adopted Sona, who fled Ionia during the Noxian invasion, to protect her against those who would hunt her down for being a mage. Let's just say that when this man died, he canonically had a legendary funeral. But unfortunately, yes, he died. The last cards here are Gentleman's Duel, which shows a duelist from House Larot. Yes, it is a French name of a Damasian house in League of Legends, which is led by the duelist beast called Fiora. There is also a card for Flesh, which does show a man that is seemingly wearing Damasian armor, but it kinda looks like a generic spell. And lastly, there is Blast of Power, which shows one of the Damasian monster hunters piercing a dark beast. Yes, because Damasians hate magic, they especially hate magical beasts, hence why there is a group of monster hunters in Damasia, with one of the big ones being Vayne. But that wraps up the Proving Grounds deck, and so now let's get on to the rest. And because these cards are all over the place, let's try and group them by regions. So first, let's start with Noxus. Noxus is your classic empire that is all about conquering the weak. In Noxus, our champion is Darius, one of the 3 leaders of Noxus who represents might. He is known for his many expeditions into the north, and for leading the Trifarian Legion. The Cleave spell depicts Darius' axe. Draven is Darius' brother. They both got elevated to their ranks by Swain, who is also one of the leaders. But while Darius got into the leadership, Draven simply became a really good entertainer in the Reckoning arenas. In other words, he became a funny gladiator. The Blazing Scorcher is a dragon which the Noxians faced near their capital. Disintegrate is also technically a Noxian card, because Annie was a Noxian. The Legion Rearguard are members of the legendary Trifarian Legion. Their job was literally to walk behind the Legion and just finish off the dying. They rarely actually guarded anyone, since Noxus is all about pushing forward. The Noxus Helpful are actually the front line of the Trifarian Legion. Captain Farron is one of the highest ranking officers of the Legion. You may remember him from some of the older cinematics. The Iron Ballista is your classic Noxian siege engine. The Noxian Saboteur is an assassin of the Trifarian Legion. You can see them sabotaging the Shereimans during the Noxian occupation. The Ravenborn Tome is one of the books of Ravenbloom, which again is where Annie was turned into a living weapon. The description says, the book is bound in flame-resistant materials for obvious reasons. The Seal of Rage is an interesting one. You'll see that every one of the regions has one of these seal items. That's because these seals are actually Tellstones. Tellstones is a canonical game that exists within the universe of League of Legends. No one really knows where it came from. Rise even believes that it is linked to a powerful secret, but over many centuries, each region developed their own version of the game. So think of it like the League of Legends chess. The Menasol student is one of the Ravenbloom students. Specifically, he is called Dani, and he is likely partially related to the Vastai Shirei, which are essentially ancient, spiritual, animalistic humanoids. All we know about him is that he was taken into this school after his family was slaughtered. Blurry of Blades is a reference to Katarina's ultimate. Acceptable Losses shows a Noxian blade breaking. Cruel Patron shows a loyal follower of LeBlanc, who is secretly plotting against the Noxian Empire. Specifically, he knows what LeBlanc is doing with Mordekaiser underneath Noxus. Hidden Blade is the blade of the Dooku Tau assassins. The Trifarian Glory Seeker is one of the frontliners of the Legion. The Noxian Drummer is a drummer in the Noxian army. The Grand Stratagem shows us the plans of the Noxian army invading the Ionian Islands. The Noxian version of the token unit here is your common Trifarian soldier, and among the battlefields of Noxus we have the Reckoner's Arena, in other words it is the Gladiator Pit. Then there is also Arena's Greatest, which is just another point of view of the same arena. Specifically, both of these should be the Noxcria Arena of the Immortal Bastion. And lastly, there is the Trifarian War Camp. Here you can see the soon-to-be Trifarians during their final test, which usually involves a massive battle to the death. Yes, Noxians have their own Battle Royale, which wraps up Noxus, so next, let's have a look at Damasia. As we already mentioned, Damasia is a region that does not have the best relationship with magic. Besides Lux and Garen, one of our bigger champions here is also Vayne. As we mentioned before, Vayne is currently leading a squad of monster hunters in Damasia. She is doing this in succession to the Sentinels of Light, which was a group of heroes that repelled the undead of the Shadow Isles. She is carrying a crossbow made out of a relic stone, which is especially good at killing the undead. And she also got the weapon after she joined the Sentinels during quite an infamous League of Legends event, where she fought Viego, the Ruined King himself. Sona is another Damasian champion. Originally, she was born in Ionia, but when the Noxian invasion of Ionia happened, there was a group of Damasians who were dedicated to save as many Ionians as possible. One of these saved Ionians was Sona. who is a mute mage that can also use magic to control people's bodies. And as we mentioned before, she was adopted by Lord Bevel, because since she was a mage, staying in Damasia would be dangerous. So Lord Bevel knew that he was taking a big risk by hiding her. Another champion here is Fiora, the current head of House Lahore, which is a house of specialized duelists in Damasia. They are swift and extremely deadly in 1v1 situations. Cadregrin the Infernal is a dragon that scorches the southern mountains of Damasia. He is Shyvana's main enemy, who also got ruined by the Ruined King later in his story. Engard shows Fiora, and that's kinda it. The stalwart Poro is literally a Poro who wanted to join the Dauntless Vanguard, and the Damasians just let him do it for the fun of it. Reinforce shows the Dauntless Vanguard of Damasia banding together. The Last Stand shows Poppy defending the common folk of Damasia. The Mage Seeker Warden is here to reveal another part of Damasia's lore. You see, during the Mage Rebellion there was a group of people called the Mage Seekers. These were the guys who were hunting down the mages all across Damasia, after which they imprisoned and possibly tortured anyone they caught. The Mage Seekers were known for wearing their half-masks, which is exactly what you can see here. Confront shows us Shyvana backing up the Damasian Dragon Guard. Mobilize are the classic Damasian trumpets. They signal the start of a battle. Cytherea of Cloudfield is one of the biggest Damasian characters that is not a champion. She first debuted in a story where she joined the Dauntless Vanguard during the Mage Rebellion. The Mountain Drake is one of the dragons native to the north of Damasia. In the original art, you could see it trying to munch on a Damasian dragon chow. Unyielding Spirit shows us Quinn, a Damasian ranger who is under a lot of fire. And high above that you can see Valor, her friend who is a bird. Back to back shows a Damasian formation. Vanguard Captain shows us the leader of a squad of the Dauntless Vanguard. The Vanguard Sergeant is a higher ranking soldier of the Dauntless Vanguard. Vanguard Helm shows us the cool design of the Dauntless Vanguard armor. Harnessed Dragon shows us one of the dragons who were successfully tamed by Damasians in the southern mountains. King's Edict shows us King Jarvan III, the former king of Damasia who is now dead. In front of him we can see Lord Bevel. Divine Judgment is technically a Damasian spell because it comes from Kael, who is a Targonian aspect that heavily influenced the entire region. The Seal of Unity is the Damasian version of Tellstones. Funnily enough, you can buy a physical version of these. From the token units, the Damasian recruit shows the Dauntless Vanguard holding back the Black Mist. This was a battle where Cytherea of Cloudfield saved the day. Among the battlefields of Damasia, we have the Altar to Unity. This is one of the big plazas of the Damasian capital, but it is not as big as the Grand Plaza, which is essentially the main square of the capital. Lastly, the fortified position is a scene where the Damasian army fought against the Noxian Grey Legion, which wraps up Damasia, and so now let's go into Shereima. Shereima is your classic deserty empire with a cool twist. Its entire story is built around the Sun Disk, which is a legendary construction at the very center of the Shereiman Empire. It is one of the biggest mortal-made structures on this planet, and this thing has a lot of lore. In short, it reflects celestial magic, and it turns chosen humans into legendary god warriors, also known as the Ascended. The Clockwork Keeper is a construct created by Zillion's people, who are also known as the Chronomancers. This device was asleep for many years, and it was designed to activate after the Scourge of the Void had passed so it can start rebuilding Shereima. The TLDR of the story here is that once upon a time, in a region close to Shereima, there were mages who just opened a void portal, which started quite the apocalyptic events. That entire place, known as Icathia, was turned into a void-ridden hellscape. And so now, Zillion and his Chronomancers are trying to figure out how to stop the void using time magic. The Sunlit Guardian is one of the common soldiers of the Shereiman Empire. Zonia's Hourglass, which is an item you can recognize from League, was designed by the Chronomancers to temporarily stop time around it. Despite looking like a Hextech device, the Energy Conduit is one of Zerath's creations. It simply channels his power. Promising Future is simply another one of the Chronomancer's inventions. Unchecked Power was originally shown in Legends of Runeterra as a Shereiman spell, meaning it likely depicts the Sun Disk of Shereima burning people with its light. The Dune Drake is a half-dragon, half-insect living in the deserts of Shereima. The Seal of Strength is the Shereiman version of Tellstones. Mystic Poro is is literally just a Poro chilling in Shereima. The Sai Scout is a Shereiman nomad, with the word Sai literally meaning desert in the Shereiman language. Stealthy Pursuer is Akshan's friend. They are sneaking around Shereima trying to take down the Shereiman warlords. Imperial Decree shows the Emperor of Shereima, Azir, creating sand soldiers. Shereima also has one battlefield, which is the Obelisk of Power, which is one of the conduits of Zerath's power, which can be found in Nerimazeth, a city that many years ago used to be the original capital of the Shereiman Empire. But that's enough for Shereima, so now let's move on to Targon. Mount Targon also possibly needs a bit of a TLDR of its story. Essentially, this mountain was created after celestial beings reached down to the planet and they just ripped up the mountain from the ground. Climbing this place is deadly in the vast majority of the cases. But should you reach the top, you might get to a place that is linked to the great celestial realms. One of the people who successfully ascended the mountain was Tariq. Tariq was originally a Damasian who really wasn't good at being Damasian. And so, after committing a few crimes, he was sent to Mount Targon to die. But in a twist of fates, Tariq successfully climbed the mountain, and he was chosen by the Celestial known as the Protector to become the aspect of the Protector, essentially becoming a Targonian demigod. Another one of these is also Leona. You see, Mount Targon is divided into two camps. Though they were once united, we now have the Solari who worship the sun and the Lunari who worship the moon. Leona is a Solari who successfully climbed the mountain and who was chosen by the Celestials to become the aspect of the sun, or again, also becoming a demigod. The falling star is one of Aurelian's comets. The raging firebrand is a gigantic unique dragon that lives on the mountain. It is unique because the celestial forces of this place turned it into a strange creature. But it's also unique because it looks kinda like an insect more than a dragon. The immortal phoenix is one of the celestial beings that exist beyond Mount Targon in the celestial realm. The Solari shield bearer is a Solari frontline who can be seen deflecting a dagger from a Lunari assassin. The Eclipse Herald is a celestial animal that lives on the mountain, which flies into the sky before the eclipse happens. Since the eclipse is technically the combination of the sun and the moon, that's when various magical events happen on the mountain. The Solari Shrine shows how the Solari are channeling the power of the sun. The White Flame Protector is one of the dragons protecting the peak of the mountain. Consult the Past isn't really connected to Targon, but I don't have another place to put it, so I'm just gonna talk about it here. It is simply notes on the World Runes, which were magical stones scattered across the planet by the Celestials, which were responsible for causing the Rune Wars after people found them. Falling Comet is another one of Aurelian's falling stars. The Jeweled Colossus is a construct of the Protector, which is guarding the artifacts of the peak of the mountain. The Gemcraft Seer is one of the locals who follow Tariq's guidance. The necklaces she makes are supposed to protect those who climb the mountain. The description of the Singularity card teases that it is related to the events where the magic of the sun and the moon intertwine. The Seal of Insight is the Targonian version of Tellstones. The Herald of Scales is one of the Targonian natives who can communicate with the dragons. The Mind Splitter is a legendary draconic celestial who protects the peak of Mount Targon. It was described to literally melt your mind should you peer into its gaze. The Peak Guardian is also called the Arbiter of the Peak. This is the being you meet at the very peak of Mount Targon during your ascension. It is the last thing you're going to witness before becoming a celestial aspect. The Solari Chief actually shows a well-known Solari. It is Ravoon, Daylight Spear, who is among Leona's most powerful champions. The symbol of the Solari literally shows us the Solari Sigil. And then Targon also has a few cool battlefields. The Aspirants Climb are the lower parts of the mountain. They feature Chip, our friendly stone elemental. There is also the Star-Tipped Peak, which in fact is not the very peak of the mountain, because that would be Targon's Peak. Here you can even see the Arbiter of the Peak standing there menacingly. But that is it for Targon, so now let's move on to Buildwater, our classic pirate city in the middle of the ocean. Our first champion here is Misfortune, a character who is trying to get Buildwater under control after it was brutalized by Gangplank. Of course, she has a lot of history with him because he killed her parents, which set her on her path of vengeance. In fact, she nearly killed Gangplank after blowing off his arm. But unfortunately, Gangplank doesn't appear in Riftbound as a champion yet. He just gets a lot of references. So just know that Gangplank's crew are also sometimes called the Jagged Crew. Another champion here is Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is a simple gambler who learned how to use magic to manipulate cards. He's also a mercenary who is often hired to steal things, since his magic also involves teleportation. The Brazen Buccaneer is a member of Gangplank's crew on the ship called the Dreadway. Shakedown is actually not someone beating Tamakenge, whom people know from League. Instead, this shows a brawl in a Buildwater pub, with one of the many fishy froggy guys. Riptide Rex is your classic Buildwater engineering done by a Yordle. Stupefy shows one of the Jagged Crew pirates getting hit. Crackshot Corsair is a Yordle who is part of Miss Fortune's crew. The first mate is actually the Jagged Butcher from Gangplank's crew. Arena Bar is a bar at one of the boxing arenas in Buildwater. Pirate's Haven is one of the many bars in Buildwater. The Pit Rookie is one of the fighters in the mentioned boxing rings. Buildwater Bully shows us Mako, one of the crew members of Jack the Winner, though here specifically they are fighting in the Navori arena, which is in Ionia. Cannon Barrage shows us Gangplank shooting from his ship. This is a reference to his ultimate from League of Legends. Challenge are two members of the Jagged Crew challenging each other to a fight. The Kraken Hunter is a harpooner of the Jagged Crew. The Shipyard Skulker is your classic Buildwater cutthroat. The Sneaky Deckhand is another member of the Jagged Crew, who is planting down Gangplank's powder keg. Though interestingly enough, in the Riftbound version this has a quote from Miss Fortune, which might actually be a mistake. Stacked Deck is an alternative version of Swindle from Legends of Runeterra. You can see that the new art here shows that they are playing for Ionian coins. So who knows, maybe they are playing in Ionia. The Siren is Miss Fortune's iconic ship. The Traveling Merchant is a shopkeeper that has his shop attached to a giant crab. Treasure Trove is your simple pirate treasure. The Maddened Marauder is a weird race of sea folk who like to sail around collecting garbage. They are also a joke on minions. Originally coming from a totally different continent, the Tide Turner is a member of Neela's squad, who arrived in Buildwater to fight the biggest sea monsters they could find. They also arrived in Buildwater to interrogate graves to find where the Ruined King is. The Seal of Discord is Buildwater version of Tellstones. Cal the Weak is someone not having fun on a ship. Petty Officer is a Yordle member of the Jagged Crew. Salvage are just crates dragged up from the sea bottom. Baited Hook shows us a known place in Buildwater. These are the slaughter docks where the locals got sea monsters. Buildwater also has only a single battlefield, which is Reaver's Row, which is one of the main market lanes of Buildwater. But that's it for pirates, so now on to Builttover. Our main champion here is Vi. We all know Vi from Arcane. She is a kid with a good heart, who also joined the Enforcers of Builttover after getting into a rather complicated relationship. Of course, with her we also got Caitlyn as a champion. The reason why she looks different here compared to Arcane is because this was her original design from Legends of Runeterra, where she was shown later in her life as a captain of the Enforcers. Though again, after all the Arcane retcons, I'm pretty sure she should be missing an eye. Then there is Heimerdinger, another character from Arcane. He is our favorite Yordle engineer. Another champion we got here is Blitzcrank. Unfortunately, after the great Arcane retcons, he still doesn't have an entirely canon story. So he's just a cleaning golem walking around Zone now. The Thermo Beam depicts the Incognium Runeterra being used as a weapon. Originally, this invention was used to track people all around the world. But after its creator died, nobody knew how to use it, and it turns out it could also be used as a weapon. The Adeptatron is a mech created by Heimerdinger. Despite it looking like a KFC bucket, this mech throws tiny bots around to do various tasks. Eager Apprentice is one of the many inventors of Builttover. Smokescreen shows us the many tools of the Enforcers. The Progress Day is an event that happens once a year. We could even see it happen in Arcane. where inventors present their best creations during a competition. It is a big holiday in Builttover. Undercover Agent is actually a member of Caitlyn's modern crew. Daring Poro is a Poro that was shot out of a cannon during the Progress Day. Faithful Manufactor is an inventor of House Talis many years after Arcane. You can even see she's holding Jace's hammer. Similarly, Forge of the Future shows one of the smiths of the House Talis. Albus Pharaohs is the current head of the Pharaohs family. They were referenced in Arcane, and it is the same house where Camille comes from. Machine Evangel shows a machine that was possessed by the Black Mist during the events of the Ruination. Maybe this one will make more sense once we talk about the Shadow Isles. But that is it for Builttover, so now let's move on to Zaun. Our main champion here is Jinx. I don't think she needs much explanation because of Arcane. She was a prodigy inventor until a great tragedy turned her mad. Echo is another champion here. You will also know him from Arcane for saving the entirety of Builttover and Zaun. And Victor is another champion you'll know from Arcane for getting beaten by Echo. Also for having some of the coolest screenshots from the entire series. Then there is Mundo, a former bodyguard of a Cam Baron who got punished by stepping onto his boss's toes. The Cam Baron sent him into the Oswald Asylum, where it turns out the doctors used questionable treatments. And so he turned purple and mad after taking large sum of unproved medicines. Somehow, Warwick also became a champion here, and we're not sure just how canon this form is compared to Arcane. That's something the future will tell. The Chemtech Enforcers are your common goons used by the modern Cam Barons of Zaun. For context, this would be many years after the events of Arcane. The Flame Chompers are, of course, Jinx's Chompers, which are about to blow up one of the goons. Similarly, Get Excited is Jinx's infamous Monkey Bomb. Hextech Ray obviously belongs to Victor, though here it shows the original Hex Claw, which could be a reference to Victor's old design, or it could be the prototype claw from Arcane. Unlicensed Armory is just about the most Zaunite armory you can get. Convergent Mutation is actually the creation of one of Echo's friends further down his storyline. There, a time anomaly version of one of his friends tried to duplicate an Owlcat from the Bandal City. Time Warp shows Echo's ability to rewind time. Sabotage shows Jinx sabotaging her own gun, or maybe it's just the gun malfunctioning. Whirlwind shows Janna, the spirit of wind who was worshipped by native Zaunites during the times of the Shereiman Empire. Zaunite Bouncer is one of the guards of a local music club where Seraphine sang before. Invent Timelines shows Echo using his device to rewind time. The token units of Zaun are none other than Victor's arcane zombies. Zaun also has 3 battlefields, one of which is the Back Alley Bar, which is a Zaunite bar, the Zaunite Warrens, which is in the sewers below Zaun. The local rodents here collect the most puffcaps, and sometimes they make statues out of them. And lastly, there is also the Candlelit Sanctum. This is a secret place hidden underneath Zaun itself, which serves as a sanctum dedicated to Janna, similar to that one place with pillars you may remember from Arcane. But that is it for Zaun 2, so now let's move on to Freljord, which is your classic northern frozen landscape. Here our first champion is Tryndamere. Tryndamere is a barbarian who came from a tribe that worshipped the demigod known as the Iron Boar. One day, Aatrox, a powerful Darkin, entered the tribe. Everyone immediately started worshipping him because they believed that he was the Iron Boar, but only moments later the Darkins started slaughtering the entire tribe. The only one who survived was Tryndamere, who was resurrected by his primal rage. In reality, the cinematics had shown us that every time Tryndamere is about to die, when death comes for him, with death itself being the spirit known as Kindred here, he fights it back until death lets him live another day. This is why Tryndamere is seemingly immortal. He is simply willing to fight death itself. The Blinded by Fury spell shows Tryndamere's rage in action. Another big champion here is Volibear, who is one of the great demigods of the Freljord. In the story, Volibear is simply referred to as the Volibear, because it is seen as a powerful force of nature which people worship. In fact, the Freljordian demigods gain power from their worshippers, with Volibear specifically wanting his worshippers to fight and earn their right to survive in the Freljord. Should they be weak when they worship him, he would simply kill them. Or break their mind. What is cool about Volibear is that his alternative version is also technically canon, because sometimes his worshippers can lose themselves to Volibear's power. When this happens, these worshippers turn into horrific beastly monstrosities, who are also known as the Ursine. The alternative card simply shows us what Volibear looks like to the Ursine once they go mad. Linked to this, the Magma Worm is actually a legendary beast which Volibear fought in the ancient times. Its name is Rond, and after Volibear killed it, its corpse formed the Wormback Mountains. The Sky Splitter is simply Volibear calling the storm. Then there is Anivia, another Freljordian demigod who is Volibear's sibling. It is this frosty demigod that is responsible for creating the true ice, which is a special kind of ice that can simply kill you if you touch it. Another champion here is also Udyr. Udyr was born into the world as a spirit walker, which is a special kind of a shaman who can commune with all the spirits, be it the spirits of people, beasts, plants, or even the dead, with his specialty being channeling the spirits of the demigods themselves. The Puri Poro is a Poro who got sick, and Braum is currently trying to feed it medicine. Brynir Thundersong is an Iceborn of the Freljord who follows the way of the Volibear. Not only does she seem strong enough to behold its power, but she can also channel it, which is very unique. The Poro Herder is literally an old man herding Poros. Watchful Sentry is a soldier loyal to Ash, who is defending the Avarosan territories. The Stormclaw Ursine is one of the shamans who lost themselves to the Volibear, and who was transformed into a beastly monstrosity. If you look closer, you can even see human teeth inside the maw of the bear. The Catalyst of Eons is an item from League of Legends, which is still mostly a mystery to us, though it is believed to be some kind of a Freljordian rune. The Spoils of War shows us the Winter's Claw successfully pillaging Avarosan territory. The Wildclaw Shaman is one of the native shamans to the Freljord, who can channel the power of the Wildclaw wolves. Dazzling Aurora shows us the Freljordian shamans just witnessing some beauty. Call to Glory shows us Trundle, who became the Troll King. Soaring Scout is a hawk used by the Avarosans to scout out the area. You can see a Spirit Walker is looking through its eyes. The Freljord also has one battlefield, which is the Sigil of the Storm. This is a massive rune near the territory of the Ursine, which channels Volibear's power. But that is it for the Freljord, so now let's move on to the Shadow Isles. The Shadow Isles actually have a massive story. So, super TLDR is that once upon a time there were the Blessed Isles. Viego, the ruined king, then marched in, and he made the isles blow up with spirit magic, which created the Black Mist. It ruined the islands and turned them into the Shadow Isles, with the mist now roaming around, turning all the living into the undead. Our first champion here is Karthus. Karthus was originally a Noxian who, as a child, was fascinated by death. He literally just walked around the healing tents and watched people die. Eventually, he learned about a place that was full of death called the Shadow Isles, and he willingly let the undead claim him there. Now, while Nocturne isn't a champion related to the Shadow Isles, he is pictured preying on the explorers of the Shadow Isles here. But in reality, Nocturne is a demon who invades people's dreams and kills them there. When we get to Ionia, you will see that his greatest enemies are tiny sprites. The Raging Soul depicts the Black Mist devouring the living. Also, this is the censored version because the game launched in China. The original was more dreadful. The Playful Phantom is the soul of a child that was cursed by the Black Mist. The twist here is the swing the child is on is a twisted monster attacking Damasia. The Seal of Focus is the Blessed Isles version of Tellstones. Wraith of Echoes is another one of the twisted souls of Old Helya, which used to be the capital city of the Blessed Isles. The Carnivorous Snapwine was originally a peaceful flower before it was twisted by the Black Mist. Similarly, the Dreadbloom Predator used to be the roots of a tree. The Cemetery Attendant is a poor doggy that was claimed by the Mist. Fight or Flight is an explorer trying to survive on the Shadow Isles. Morbid Return shows us the ruination of a Damasian of the Dauntless Vanguard. The description of the card even has a quote from Viego, the ruined king. Fading Memories shows us a soul claimed by the Mist, who witnessed her own reflection for the first time. Rasa the Sunderer is a legendary amalgamation of lost souls that is harvesting more and more. Unfortunately, this is the censored version for the Chinese release. The original design looked a lot cooler. Similarly, the Soul Gorger is a simple harvester of souls. The Harrowing is the name of an event that happens once a year in Buildwater. During the Harrowing, the Black Mist rises and leaves the Shadow Isles. Of course, the closest place to the Shadow Isles is Buildwater, so naturally, during the Harrowing, Buildwater is invaded by the undead. Spectral Matron is a twisted spirit that literally hosts the souls of claimed children under her spectral skirt. Vengeance was originally Callista's ability. She just hunts down the former loyalists of Hecarim. That's a long story actually. Speaking of which, Commander Ladros is a massive character in the lore of this place. He was originally Viego's personal guard, because he was so massive and strong. He was also Callista's lover, and they both got slaughtered on the Blessed Isles by Hecarim, who betrayed them. The Shadow Isles also has two battlefields. The Hollowed Tomb is the place where Ladros had fallen. You can see his shield locked in there, and Vilema's lair, which of course is where you can find the giant spider god Vilema. But that is it for the Shadow Isles, so now let's move on to Ionia, which has by far the most cards, and also an endless sea of champions. One of the main champions here is Ahri. A very long story short, Ahri comes from the Vistani, a race of people who had the unique ability to manipulate souls and memories. Right now, she might be the last living Vistani, and without knowing how to control her abilities, she's often overwhelmed with her hunger for souls, with charm being what Ahri uses to lure people in before she consumes their souls. Another champion here is Yasuo, who coincidentally fell in love with Ahri during the events of the Ruined King game. Yasuo is a master of the wind technique, who was tasked to protect their elder during the Noxian invasion. Unfortunately, when he left his post to kill some Noxians, the elder died and everyone thought it was him who killed him. And so, ever since then, even though he was innocent, he was wanted all across Ionia. Another champion here is also Lee Sin. Lee Sin is an Ionian monk who is capable of unleashing the fire of the dragon spirit. When he was young, he was taught how to control it, but when the Noxian invasion arrived, he was forced to use it in combat to save his people. This power engulfed him in a tempest of fire, which burned his skin and burnt out his eyes, which is why Lee Sin is blind. Another champion is also Set. Set is someone who was born after a Noxian soldier had an affair in Ionia during the invasion. With Noxian blood in his body, Set naturally has the urge to fight. And so, while his mother thinks he has a normal job, he actually runs a secret underground reckoning pit in Ionia, where he often fights himself too. Another champion is also Kain, originally a Noxian child that was put onto the front lines during the invasion of Ionia, where Noxians hoped that Ionians wouldn't fight back against children. Thankfully, Kain was taken in by Zed, the master of the Ionian Shadow Order, who taught him how to use the Shadow technique, and later in his life, Kain actually picked up a Darkin weapon which corrupted half of his body. And yet another champion is also Karma. Long story short, Karma is a generational reincarnation of the Ionian spirit. Think of her like the high priestess of Ionia who can commune with the entire region. With yet another champion being Shen, the Eye of Twilight. Shen is a master of the Kinku who has a simple job: to keep Ionia balanced by killing people when they harm spirits, and by killing spirits when they harm people. That's why Shen has two blades. A physical one to kill mortals, and a spirit blade for cleansing spirits. And now we are finally done with champions. So, the Fi is a simple counterspell. Find Your Center is one of the Ionian monks who channeled the spirits of Ionia, which is pretty much the same as meditation. Rune Prison, even though it is a green spell, is technically used by Rise. It creates a Rune Prison. Stand United is a spell Shen uses to cross into the spirit realm, which he's using like a teleport to then hop back outside into the physical realm. The wielder of water is one of the Marai, a race of watery Vastaya who live all around the oceans from Ionia to Mount Targon. Block is one of the Kinku deflecting an arrow. Discipline is, once again, one of the Kinku ninjas. The Mask of Foresight depicts the Mask Keeper giving a mask to one of the Kinku acolytes. Spirit Refuge shows the Spirit Blade which Shen is using to kill spirits. Wind Wall is likely supposed to reference Yasuo's ability to create a wind wall, but I'm not sure why it shows a root. The Wizened Elder is one of the Elder Monks of Ionia. You may remember one of these from Yasuo's older cinematic. Mystic Reversal depicts two Empyreans, which are mythical animals flying above Ionia. In the Orb of Regret, we can see Ari praying to the great spirits of Ionia. Specifically in this scene, she seeks them out to replant the seed of Omikailan, the World Tree, which is also known as the God Willow, meaning that these three are Sainen, the Thousand-Tailed, the Mourned, and the Pathless Ancient. You can see all three of them in this art. The Sprite Call shows us the sprites that come from the grove of the Dreaming Tree. Their job is to enter the dreams of those who are asleep to ward them away from demons. Retreat is technically the recall ability from League of Legends. It shows one of the Kinku hopping into the spirit realm. The Sprite Mother is the spiritual being that is releasing the dream sprites to ward the demons off. The Thousand-Tailed Watcher is the previously mentioned Sainen, the Thousand-Tailed, who is protecting the heart of Ionia. The Kinku Monk is one of the acolytes who is potentially training to be a Kinku ninja. This one specifically is practicing Shen's art of teleportation. Mistfall is perhaps my favorite place in the entire universe. It is a hidden valley in Ionia that also serves as a memorial to the great war of the Vasai Shirei who fought the Titans. You can see one of those stony titans in the background. This entire place is heavily occupied by ancient spirits, which is why the sword makers from all across the world try to come here, they plant down the swords they forged, and they come back sometimes years later to collect them, after they were infused with spiritual magic. Oftentimes, these swords were also decorated with poems written by the swordsmiths. One of these legendary sword makers was Doran, whom you may know from League of Legends for making Doran's sword. Gust was a card that was originally related to the spirits Ari seeked out. Unworthy Soul shows the spirit of Royce, a Noxian defector, being ripped out. This man was a Noxian who got converted into the Ionian Shadow Order by Kayn. Ride the Wind is referencing Yasuo's mastery over the wind. Phasebreaker shows Set smashing two Noxians against each other. Ionia also has token units, and here it is the sprites of the Sprite Mother. And of course they also have a couple of battlefields. One of them is the Grove of the God Willow, with the God Willow being Omikailan. Here we can see how they planted the new tree, after the previous one was cut down by Ivern the Cruel. Another one is Navori Fighting Pit. This is the one that should be led by Set. And in front of it you can see Jack the Winner, who is hopping in for a match. Then there is also the Dreaming Tree. This tree bloomed from a fallen branch of the God Willow, making it related to Omikailan. This is where the sprites come from, and this is also where you could find Lilia. There is also the Windswept Hillock, which is one of the houses that Yasuo used to temporarily hide. And lastly, there is the Monastery of Hirana, which is the home to many monks such as Lee Sin. But that is it for Ionia, so now let's move on to the Void. Here our main champion is Kai'Sa. Kai'Sa has a fairly simple story. When she was a kid, she fell into a minor void rift. Here she was able to survive only because of a small void creature that attached itself to her body, and it formed around her almost like an armor. Kai'Sa is still mostly herself, she is not being controlled or anything like that, but this void creature essentially gave her voidy abilities. The Void Seeker, as an example, is Kai'Sa unleashing the power of the void. Malzahar is another champion here. Malzahar is a character whose mind got plagued by the visions of the void. He started his life as a seer who was really good at fortune telling. He was able to predict everyone's lives, but he was never able to see his own future. That was until he arrived in Icathia, where the void showed him his destiny. He would prepare the world for the coming of the end. Surprisingly, Kog'Maw is also a champion here. Kog'Maw doesn't have a lot of lore, but we know he is a void creature that came onto Runeterra through a void rift, where his goal is one thing: to consume all reality. Surprisingly, the void also does have a battlefield, which is the Void Gate. This is a massive rift that opened in Icathia, and which allows the Voidborn to pour onto Runeterra. But that's kinda it for the Void, so now onto Ishtal. Ishtal is a special place that is heavily connected to the Void, because it happens to be right next to Icathia. So after the Ishtali people witnessed how destructive the Void can be, they simply decided to raise massive walls of plants around their entire kingdom, and they essentially isolated Ishtal from the rest of the world, believing that the rest of the world was destroyed by the Void. Of course, that didn't happen, and only now they are realizing that. Our champion here is Qiyana. Qiyana is the royal heir to the Ishtali throne, who is also an incredibly powerful elemental mage, which is responsible for giving her a massive ego. After many generations, she's now trying to free her nation from the self-imposed isolation, and she's trying to make the world respect Ishtal again. Besides this, Ishtal also has the Baka. The Baka is a breed of feral cats that are local to the Kumungu jungles around Ishtal. In League, you may know Nidalee as someone who was raised by these feral cats. And who knows, maybe this is teasing that Nidalee is joining Riftbound in the future. Regardless, here you can see the Baka Cup playing with a Builttover, because Builttover is constantly invading Ishtal to steal their wood and resources. And that is it for Ishtal. So now, onto our last region, which is Bandal City. Our first champion here is Teemo, which is also our last champion here. Teemo is a Bandal scout following the scout's code, who is also kinda battling dementia. Essentially, he's been planting down puffcaps wherever he goes, with puffcaps being very explosive mushrooms. The reason why he's doing it is because puffcaps are going extinct, and he's trying to save them because Teemo has been around for so long, he forgot where he had already planted them. So he's accidentally planting down landmines, and he already forgot where those mines are. The dangerous duo are simply two Yordles that put together a dangerous machine in Shereima. Just like Rumble or Ziggs, they use scrap to make weird machines, which is the same thing the Scrapyard champion is doing. They built a Noxian-themed mech. Party favors are all Yordlish origami. They should technically come from Nora's office. Tasty Feyfolk is a weird spirit creature that just likes to eat things, including itself. Lecturing Yordle is teaching the Bandal Scouts about the Scouts Code. Specifically here, he is lecturing a Yordle known as Ava. The Megamech is another scrap creation. The Pit Crew are the magical animals who are collecting the scrap for the Yordles. The Blast Cone Fae is another one of the mystical creatures of Bandal City. And that's kinda it. Of course, it is referencing the Blast Cone, which is an explosive flower. The things behind it are the Owl Cats. The Garbage Grabber is a Yordle construct tasked with cleaning the Bandal City portals. If you know Teemo, you know what the Mushroom Pouch is. The Portal Rescue actually shows us one of the portals leading to the Bandal City. Ava Achiever is one of the most loyal Bandal Scouts who was featured in many cinematics before. Wallop shows us Nar, a prehistoric Yordle who witnessed the arrival of the Watchers in the Freljord. Primal Strength also shows us Nar, who is about to go mad and turn into his Hulk version. Overt Operation shows us more of the Yordles who like to collect scrap and blow things up. The Ember Monk is one of the elemental Yordle monks who helped Kennen fight a void beast that was consuming the Ionian spirit realm. Pack of Wonders has a quote teasing that it is a big bundle of all the things the scouts collected. Scrap Heap is just Yordle junk. Possession, funnily enough, is an HD version of an icon of Syndra's ability. Though with the context of what is shown here, I am pretty sure it should be Vygar using his minions to do his tasks. And finally, at the very end, the Bandal City also has one battlefield, which is none other than the Bandal Tree, the heart of the Bandal City, which is also hosting the many portals leading to the entire world on its branches. And that was the lore of every single card found in the first set of Riftbound. As you saw, a lot of this lore came from the original iterations from Legends of Runeterra, with some of the smaller cards also potentially teasing more champions that will get to Riftbound in set 2. These would be Nidalee, Shyvana, Gangplank, Zilean, and Nar. All of these specifically got some references in these cards. But for now, I am done. I managed to talk about League's lore for an hour again, and I'll be honest, it feels like a holiday.